I'm Edward Warfield, the publisher of City Biz, and I'm honored today to interview Kate Dilligan, who is the founder and CEO of Cooler Heads. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you so much for having me, Edwin. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Can you explain what scalp cooling is?
Yeah. So everybody has in their mind what a cancer patient looks like. And more often than not, that cancer patient is bald. Scalp cooling is the therapy that allows chemotherapy patients to keep their hair so they can look and feel normal as they go through chemotherapy. Fundamentally, what it is it's medically induced hypothermia. Patients put on some kind of cap system that brings their scalp temperature down to 65 degrees before, during, and for several hours following each chemotherapy infusion. What that cold does is it constricts the hair follicles and restricts the blood flow to those hair follicles so they don't absorb the chemotherapy that would normally cause them to lose all of their hair. So basically, it's a way for us to protect the hair follicles as patients are going through chemo so they can stay in control of their identity.
And so, when did you first become interested in scalp cooling?
Oldest story in the world. In 2016, I was diagnosed with stage 2B breast cancer. And I so vividly remember that first meeting with my medical oncologist and him telling me that I was going to need chemotherapy. And I don't know if it was my second or third question, but I absolutely asked him, am I going to lose my hair? And he said yes. And it was actually my dear friend Sarah that went with me to those first appointments, who stayed up late at night and did the internet research and found out about cold cap therapy or scalp cooling, as it's now known. And when we asked my nurse navigator about this, we said, "Hey, we read about this therapy that where Kate could keep her hair. Is this a thing?" And Terry's response, I remember it so clearly. She said, "Well, yes, we've seen great outcomes, but most people have to pay at least $6,000. So we don't talk about it because people are going through this incredibly stressful time. And then here's this solution that you really want, but it's so expensive. Very few people can afford it." Well, I was very fortunate. At the time, I was a tech executive, so I could spend that kind of money. And I actually did do cold cap therapy throughout my 8 cycles of chemotherapy, and I kept my hair, but I spent more than $8,000. And to say it was a high friction experience doesn't even begin it. So cooler heads and making scalp cooling, affordable, accessible, scalable really comes out of my experience being that patient and really just having such limited options.
So, AMA is the first FDA approved portable and affordable scalping cooling device. Tell us about its development and traction today.
Of course. So back when I had to do cold cap therapy, the way that we made my head cold is we had gel packs that we froze in dry ice that had to be Velcroed on and off my head every 20 to 30 minutes. And so I had to pay somebody to be with me, to be taking these gel caps out of the dry ice, strapping them to my head. And very similarly, like the way, if you burn your hand or hurt your knee and you put a pack of ice on it, the ice melts, right? Because your body's ambient temperature warms it up. So it's switching these cap systems on and off my head for hours upon hours upon hours upon hours. And that's one of the reasons why this was so expensive is I sometimes had to pay people upwards of $1,000 to come and Velcro gel caps to my head that were frozen in dry ice. So AMA is really all about taking all of that work out of it. So my background is I have an MBA from Stanford. I've worked in tech, and there's something called design thinking, which is what do you want the outcome? Like, what do you want the customer experience to be? What problem are you really trying to solve? And so what we wanted to solve for is something that patients could use successfully on their own, again, based off of my experience of having to pay people all this money to administer it for me, having it be FDA cleared so physicians and nurses could feel good about it, and making it portable because you do have to do scalp cooling for several hours following each chemotherapy infusion. And fundamentally, the reason why scalp cooling is only available at 20% of infusion centers is infusion centers can't give up all of that extra chair time to a patient doing scalp cooling. They need they make money every time a new chemotherapy patient sits down, and they built their chemotherapy infusion centers for their expected number of patients. They weren't expecting, half of their chair throughput to be cut in half because of symptom management. So, having a portable system, so when patients are done with chemotherapy, but they have several hours to scalp cool, they can go to the waiting room, they can go to a library or an atrium or some other location designated by the infusion center to do their post chemotherapy cooling. So I started this company in 2018. I'm proud to say AMA is now available at 63 infusion centers across 29 health systems. I can't talk about names publicly because we have to get permission from our accounts, but I can say we're at two of the National Comprehensive Cancer Network academic institutions that set the standard of care for cancer patients. So, our traction has been phenomenal. And one of the really exciting things for me is over 70% of the health systems that are now offering AMA didn't offer it until we changed this unit economics, until we made it possible for this to be portable so it wouldn't be taking up all of this chair time. So we're already showing we can grow the market.
So, what are the financial implications of the Medicare reimbursing?
Huge, huge. Medicare is the first mover. I will say our patient population is roughly 20 to 25% Medicare, which means it's, 70, 75% not Medicare. But in the United States, insurance companies look to Medicare to be first movers. And, as a startup founder, you need a little bit of luck. Like, you need a lot of grit and determination and focus, but you also need luck. So the year we went commercial in 2022 is the year that Medicare started reimbursing for scalp cooling. And we're seeing more and more private payers coming on board. And so, everybody is aware of the financial toxicity of cancer, of how expensive it is to get sick in the United States. So having an increasing path for patients to be able to access this treatment and have it be covered as part of their overall treatment plan. Like, it used to be for breast cancer patients like me, it used to be that reconstructive surgery, if you had a lumpectomy or a mastectomy, that used to not be covered by insurance. If you'd be disfigured by breast cancer, it used to be insurance companies were like, well, you can pay for plastic surgery if you want to. Scalp cooling is moving in that direction as well. It's like, hey, look, symptom management is so important to increase adherence to treatment because, we see this all the time is, 8% of chemotherapy patients actually refuse chemotherapy because they don't want to lose their hair. And this is well established in medical literature, and people go, well, that's crazy. But, people don't always make rational decisions about their health, and they make a lot of decisions out of fear. So if we can remove that barrier and get patients into treatment, we're going to improve their outcomes so they can get back to the business of living their lives.
Cooler Heads was founded in 2018. Can you share some of the milestones getting the FDA approval, the Medicare reimbursement? There are obviously some critical milestones that you got through in this short period of time.
Yeah, well, it's like 6 years. Is it a short amount of time or not now? Like, it seems like it's, like I've lived several lifetimes. So, the first thing that I did when I founded the company does the technology exist to build the product that I want at the unit economics that I want to build it at to make this broadly accessible? So, I first invested my own money doing the engineering studies around, this design thinking process. How do we make it portable? How do we make it patient administered? How do we make it easy so we have a well-fitting cap, because that's so important to getting a good outcome. And from that period, that really, that engineering work and design thinking work that we did, we then went and validated that, not only with cancer patients like myself, but with thought leaders, with physicians who are leading medical oncologists, and saying, what would be important to you to be expanding access to this treatment? And so once we really understood what we were going to build it, I found an engineering design firm that I collaborated with very closely. I'm the lead inventor on all of our patents, to get the product built, to get it, we got it cleared by the FDA in October of 2021, and we enrolled our first patient June 30th of 2022. So we've now been commercial, that was our soft launch. We really went commercial at the end of 22. And I'm pleased to say, as of the first week of June, we already have treated now, like substantially, I think we've treated 25% more patients in 2024. And we're at what? We're at July 9th, is today. We already, treated 125% of the patients that we treated in 2023. So we're really starting to scale.
And can you tell us a little bit about your investor journey?
Yeah. And, I didn't, I have an MBA from Stanford. I'd worked in tech, but it's very different having those experiences to then being a founder because I had not worked in medical devices. I am not an engineer by training. And I'd never really worked in health tech. And so, the advice that I give to other entrepreneurs is to build a network. And so go to like really figure out like who the stakeholders are and like who are the players in the startup communities that are important to you. So for me, we're based in San Diego, so that San Diego has a really robust startup ecosystem. And then there's also a whole med tech startup ecosystem. So I got really involved in those communities and from there got the coaching to understand what the critical milestones are that I would want to hit to then start being able to go out and get angel investors and early stage VC money to build the product. And so it's not, as simple as, you come up with an idea and you go and it's easy to get investment because, especially as solo women founders raise less than 4% of all venture capital. It is very, very difficult to do. And so I really surrounded myself with a lot of people who had great networks of people who were interested in med tech, were interested in women founders, were, interested in med devices and kept kind of building this momentum around us where introductions just kept coming and, as well as, leveraging, my Stanford network. Is how, built relationships with investors early, having them write small checks in the early days to now that we're at growth, again, we're now commercial. We're doing what we said we would do. We're getting excellent traction, excellent outcomes. It's then easier for them to make, additional introductions to new investors who write those larger checks. So for me, it was really about building a strong sense of community and getting known and really sticking the landing on upcoming milestones, which makes the business less and less risky. So investors feel good about investing in you because they are largely investing in the individual founder. So like, what can you do to prove to them that you're the person that can win?
Thank you for sharing that with us. So you graduated from Stanford Business School in 2003. Can you tell us about your career, up to starting Cooler Heads?
Sure. My first career actually before business school is I worked in politics. And so I was a political fundraiser and strategist. I only worked campaign side for federal candidates. I never worked on the government side. And so you'll kind of see a through line in my career of operating in environments where there isn't a lot of infrastructure and where you really have to build everything from the ground up. And so as a political fundraiser, you really just learn to be really kind of canny and clever in how you build momentum around your candidate. And then from that, went to business school. After business school, somebody who'd been mentoring me in politics was going to start a company. He'd been NASA administrator for a decade, appointed by Bush 41, served all throughout the Clinton years, and then served for a year under Bush 43. Was interested in doing a technology company, but he'd been NASA administrator. And before that, he'd been at Tier W in major aerospace. Like he'd never built anything from the ground up. And I was employee number 2 and I helped him build that company from the ground up. And, the company ultimately wasn't successful, but we were at over 200 people at one point. I was leading our government services division where we were building software products specifically for the United States government, something that I'd never done before. But again, this thought of building something from the ground up and surrounding myself with people who could help me make the right decisions as we were building that organization. So fast forward to Cooler Heads, I had this idea from my own experience as a cancer patient And because I'd worked in politics and I'd worked in as a government contractor, government services company in technology, I was very comfortable not having all the answers and starting something from the ground up and surrounding myself with people from my business school network, from people in the startup community, as to how do I do this? And so Cooler Heads, we're growing. Our first year we did over $1 million in revenue, and we're just seeing great traction. And I'm the kind of founder where I don't believe that I have to have all the answers. I just need to be surrounded with the right people to ask the right questions too. We have an outstanding head of sales, Courtney Turek, who's just been knocking it out of the park on the commercial side. Nick Disher, who leads our engineering and manufacturing. He's an electrical engineer who's been doing med devices his whole career, has really brought, engineering rigor as we're scaling and doing the next generation of the product. Like, we really just have an outstanding executive team for this next stage of our growth.
And so, what are the growth opportunities? They're domestic at this stage. Or do you have international expansion plans?
We do have international expansion plans. Where we are right now is we're focusing on, we essentially call this product AMA 1.0. This is the first version of our product. We're going to be doing another version of the product where we're going to be making some upgrades to it, adding additional technology, adding a lot of additional features. And at that point, we're going to pursue selling internationally as well as, here in the US. But again, there's so much opportunity here in the United States because, again, 80% of infusion centers don't offer this therapy. And we see this all the time that, like, perhaps, one large health system will offer it at their main campus, but they don't offer it at their satellite campuses. And we're really focused on knocking it out of the park here in the US, and international markets will follow. And we don't necessarily need to be the people to do that. We can come up with, distribution agreements or licensing agreements. We're just going to, really just stay focused on our bread and butter here in the US and take those opportunities when we're at that next inflection point, I should say. Oh, gosh, great question. Um, for me, as a solo founder, the thing that is so important, that I really do want to share is the sense of community. And, I started this company because two of my really close friends, one morning when we were drinking coffee after going to see a concert the night before, this is, soon after I'd completed treatment, I told them I had this idea and they both looked at me and they were like, "We'd invest in that. You should totally do it." I was like, "Really?" Because, like, I was like, and I want to call the company Cooler Heads because, like, I love me a bad joke, like a bad pun. I'm in there all day long. And they're like, "No, seriously, you should do it." And, having a cancer diagnosis really does make you think about what you want to do with the rest of your life. But I have to say, like, joining these startup communities, the other founders that I've met along the way, people who are, at roughly my stage, and then, the generosity of startup founders who are, a couple of years ahead of us in terms of commercial traction, but who are willing to get on the phone and give me some advice. As a CEO, as a solo founder, it is just you, but you don't have to do it on your own, and really surrounding yourself with it's, people in your personal life, but then people who you meet who are also on this crazy startup journey. Their companies are going to be different, but you've all had the same experiences, disappointments from investors or challenges with supply chain or challenges with employees or what have you. Like, just don't go through it alone is my biggest piece of advice.
Well, Kate, this interview has meant a lot to me. My mother, I used to drive my mother into Sloan Kettering for her cancer many, many decades ago. And as I mentioned to you, my daughter's dealing with it now. So thank you for your time. What you're doing is important. And thank you.
No, I mean, people talk about, we often have patients who apologize for being upset about losing their hair. And the thing is, it's privacy. And so keeping your hair during chemotherapy, it's about privacy, agency, and identity. It's not having to talk to every single person that you meet on the street that you're a cancer patient. It's being able to go to work and go to, your kids' school events and just go about your life and have it be something that you're dealing with, but you don't have to confront in the faces of everybody that you see. So thank you so much for this opportunity, for me to hopefully reach a new audience and talk, and evangelize scalp cooling, because it's important for men and for women. All patients with solid tumors should have access to this treatment, and that's our mission.
And please keep us apprised as you on your capital journey, on your technology journey, on your expansion plans. It's an important story, and we want to keep sharing it with our readers and our viewers. So thank you again, Kate.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.